The Alpha King rejected his fated Luna. Then her hidden wolf awakened before the kingdom. Hello, everyone. Before we step into today's story, I have one small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It only takes a moment. It is completely free, and it helps us continue bringing you powerful, dramatic, and emotional stories of love, courage, and destiny. Your support truly means more to us than you know. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel and discovering who is joining us from across the world. Now, settle in and stay with us, because today's story begins with a king who rejected the woman destiny chose for him, without realizing that something ancient and sacred had been sleeping inside her all along. Now, let's begin today's story. Then reject me, your majesty, but do not call your fear wisdom. Clara Whitmore's voice carried farther than she intended, crossing the vast royal moon hall and settling over hundreds of silent faces. King Rowan Blackthorn stood before her beneath the silver banners of his bloodline, his expression controlled, though his wolf had been repeating one impossible word since Clara entered the hall. Mate. He had known it before she reached the center aisle, before her gray eyes lifted toward his throne, before the scent of rain and winter cedar filled his senses. Clara Whitmore was his fated Luna, and he had rejected her anyway. Whispers moved through the hall. Clara heard them all. Wolfless, weak, an omega. For 23 years, those words had followed her through Moonridge like shadows. She had never shifted, never heard the comforting voice of a wolf inside her mind. In a kingdom where strength was measured by rank, scent, and the power of one's wolf, Clara seemed to possess none of them. Rowan's council had noticed immediately. A king needs strength beside him, one elder had murmured. The kingdom cannot bow to a Luna without a wolf. Rowan had spent his life learning to place duty before desire. Tonight, that lesson became his greatest mistake. I reject the bond between us, he said. The words sounded colder than he felt. Something inside Clara seemed to go perfectly still. She had imagined discovering her mate someday, but never like this. Never beneath 100 chandeliers while nobles watched her dignity become public entertainment. Yet she refused to lower her head. Slowly, Clara removed the delicate silver bracelet that attendants had placed around her wrist when the bond was recognized. It carried the crescent emblem reserved for a possible royal Luna. She crossed the polished floor and placed it at the foot of Rowan's throne. No tears, no plea, just quiet courage. Rowan stared at her, and for the first time that evening, certainty deserted him. Would you have rejected me? Clara asked softly, if no one else were watching? The question struck deeper than anger could have. Rowan looked toward his council, toward the nobles waiting for him to defend his decision, then back at the woman destiny had placed before him. He had no answer. Clara gave him a small, sorrowful nod, as though his silence had answered enough. Then she turned and walked toward the towering doors. With every step, the crowd parted. No one laughed now. No one seemed to know why. Perhaps dignity had a power of its own. Clara reached the doorway when a strange warmth stirred beneath her ribs. She stopped. For one breath, she thought it was grief. Then came a heartbeat that was not hers. Deep beneath the royal moon hall, behind a stone door sealed for nearly 800 years, ancient silver markings began to glow. Dust trembled from forgotten carvings. Something old had heard Clara's name. Something the kingdom believed had vanished forever. And somewhere inside the Omega everyone had called empty, a pair of hidden eyes slowly opened. By the time Clara reached the eastern corridor, the warmth beneath her ribs had faded into something quieter, almost watchful. She pressed one hand against her chest and kept walking. Behind her, the royal moon hall remained silent, but she could still feel the weight of hundreds of eyes. She had spent her entire life learning how to survive. Those looks. Moonridge had taught her early that people could decide what you were before hearing you speak. At 10, Clara had watched the other children discover their wolves through dreams and instinct. At 16, she had waited for the first whisper inside her mind. At 18, she had stood beneath the full moon while her family waited for her first shift. Nothing happened. By 23, the kingdom had given her condition a name that sounded almost polite. Wolfless. The word never described what Clara felt inside. There had always been something there, a silence too deep to be emptiness. Her grandmother Evelyn understood that better than anyone. Years earlier, when Clara had asked why she seemed different, Evelyn had taken her hands and said, "Silence does not always mean emptiness. Sometimes the oldest things know how to wait." Clara had dismissed it as kindness from a grandmother protecting a frightened girl. Now she was not so certain. She reached an open balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Moonlight covered the hedges and stone paths in pale silver. Nearly 50 feet below, servants hurried between carriages while royal guests celebrated inside. Clara breathed in the cool night air and remembered another room where she had once been told she did not belong. Two neighboring packs had argued for weeks over access to a mountain reservoir during a summer drought. Their leaders had shouted over maps while Clara quietly studied rainfall records and harvest schedules. She had suggested alternating access according to crop cycles, with emergency reserves shared between both packs. The elders adopted her plan almost word for word. Then they thanked the men at the table and asked Clara to bring more coffee. She had learned something important that day. Being ignored did not make an idea less wise, just as being praised did not make a person right. Tonight, Rowan had forgotten that distinction. Clara closed her eyes. "You chose their approval over your own truth," she whispered, though the king was nowhere near her. A soft sound answered from somewhere behind her. Clara turned. Evelyn stood beneath the stone archway, wrapped in a dark blue traveling cloak, her silver hair glowing beneath the moonlight. Her expression was not surprised. It was worried. "Grandmother?" Clara asked. Evelyn approached slowly. "Tell me exactly what you felt when you left the hall." Clara hesitated. A second heartbeat. Evelyn stopped. For the first time Clara could remember, fear crossed the older woman's face. "That is impossible. You told me my wolf might be waiting." "I hoped I was right," Evelyn whispered. "I never hoped I was right about this." Clara stared at her. "About what?" Evelyn looked toward the palace, where far beneath the marble floors, something ancient was waking. "Your wolf is not missing, Clara." Her voice fell almost to a whisper. "She has been hiding. And if she is what I think she is, the question is not why she waited." Evelyn tightened her hand around Clara's. "The question is what she was hiding from." Rowan remained alone beside the throne long after Clara disappeared from sight, surrounded by a silence that felt heavier than judgment. The nobles had slowly resumed their conversations, but he heard almost none of them. One question remained in his mind. Would you have rejected me if no one else were watching? His wolf had been restless from the moment Clara entered the hall. Now there was nothing. Rowan reached inward for the familiar presence that had accompanied him since adolescence, expecting irritation, resistance, anything. Silence answered. He straightened. His wolf had never withdrawn from him before. "Your Majesty." Lady Vanessa Ashford approached with several council members behind her. She was graceful, composed, and exactly the Luna they believed the kingdom needed. "The council recommends completing the selection ceremony tomorrow evening," Elder Marcus said. "Lady Vanessa has the lineage, education, and strength required beside the crown." Rowan studied them. Yesterday, those qualities would have sounded reasonable. Tonight, they sounded like a list created by people who believed destiny should obey politics. "Tomorrow," Rowan said finally. The council bowed and withdrew, satisfied. Vanessa lingered. "You made the responsible choice." Rowan looked toward the doors Clara had walked through. "Did I?" Vanessa had no answer. Later, inside his private study, Rowan stood before a tall window overlooking Blackthorn Valley. Moonlight stretched across nearly 20 miles of forest, touching villages and pack lands that depended upon his decisions. His father had taught him that a king could survive being disliked, but never being perceived as weak. Rowan had built his reign around that lesson. He had negotiated peace between rival packs, opened winter grain reserves during poor harvests, and replaced several ancient laws that punished Omegas simply for their rank. He had believed himself fair. Yet when fairness demanded something personally difficult, he had failed his own standard. Rowan closed his eyes and searched again for his wolf. "Nothing." "Speak to me," he whispered. The silence remained. A knock sounded at the door. Elder Silas Hawthorne entered carrying a narrow wooden case covered in dust. Unlike the other council members, Silas served the Royal Moon Archive and rarely attended political meetings. "Something happened beneath the palace tonight," he said. Rowan turned. Silas placed the case on the desk and opened it. Inside lay a parchment bearing a faded silver symbol shaped like a crescent surrounding an eye. The oldest chamber in the archive responded to someone in the moon hall. Responded how? The seals began glowing. Rowan stared at him. Those chambers have been closed for centuries. 812 years, Silas corrected quietly. Until tonight. Rowan felt a chill move through the room. Silas studied him carefully. Who did the moon choose? Rowan said nothing. He did not need to. Understanding crossed the elder's face. The Omega you rejected. Rowan's jaw tightened. Clara Whitmore. Silas repeated her surname under his breath, then suddenly looked toward the parchment. Whitmore. He opened an old ledger and searched rapidly through its pages. Several lines had been deliberately removed, leaving only fragments around them. One surviving sentence stopped him. Silas went pale. What does it say? Rowan asked. The elder looked up. It says the crown must never mistake silence for absence. Rowan's heartbeat slowed. Clara's grandmother had used almost the same words years before, though he could not know that. Silas carefully closed the ledger. Your Majesty, whatever awakened beneath this palace tonight did not answer your crown. His eyes moved toward the distant eastern wing, where Clara had gone. It answered her. The next evening, Clara returned to the Royal Moon Hall for one reason only. Leaving would have meant allowing everyone else to decide what her rejection meant. She would not give them that power. Evelyn walked beside her until they reached the entrance, then squeezed her hand. Whatever happens tonight, remember who you were before anyone called you weak. Clara nodded and entered. The hall looked different now. Hundreds of candles burned beneath silver arches, and the kingdom's banners hung above representatives from nearly every major pack. At the far end stood Rowan, dressed in formal black and silver, with the crown of the first alpha resting on a velvet cushion beside him. Lady Vanessa waited several feet away in a pale blue ceremonial gown. She looked every inch the Luna the council had imagined. Strong bloodline, powerful wolf, perfect education. Clara quietly took her assigned place near the rear of the hall. She expected whispers, perhaps pity. Instead, people moved aside as she passed. Some would not meet her eyes. Rowan did. Across more than 100 feet of polished marble, his gaze found Clara immediately. Something tightened in his chest. He searched inward once more for his wolf. Silence. Elder Marcus stepped forward. Tonight, the crown recognizes a new path for the kingdom. Rowan barely heard him. His attention remained on Clara. She was not hiding. She was not pleading. Somehow that made yesterday's decision feel even smaller. The ceremony began. Vanessa approached the throne and bowed her head. Silas stood near the archive doors, watching with visible unease. Rowan lifted the ancient crown. According to tradition, the silver markings along its rim should glow when the crown accepted a royal Luna candidate. He lowered it toward Vanessa. Nothing happened. A murmur moved through the hall. Rowan tried again. The silver remained dark. Elder Marcus cleared his throat. Old artifacts are sometimes unreliable. Silas looked sharply at him. Not this one. Clara felt warmth beneath her ribs. Her breath caught. Thump. The second heartbeat. Stronger now. She pressed her fingers against her chest. Thump. The candles nearest her flickered. Rowan turned toward her. Clara closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. For years, she had wondered what was wrong with her. Tonight, standing among people who had measured her worth by everything she lacked, a different thought finally came. Perhaps I was never empty. The warmth spread through her chest, gentle rather than frightening, like sunlight reaching a room sealed for winter. Then a voice spoke inside her mind. Female, calm, ancient. You were never without me. Clara's eyes opened. Every candle in the hall went still. Not dark. Still. Their flames stopped moving as though time itself had paused. Silver light appeared beneath Clara's feet, tracing delicate symbols across the marble. Gasps traveled through the crowd. Evelyn covered her mouth. Silas stepped forward, staring at the markings with disbelief. Rowan lowered the crown. Clara, he whispered. She could barely hear him over the second heartbeat. Thump, thump. The ancient doors beneath the royal balcony gave a deep, resonant hum. Silver lines climbed their surface, revealing symbols hidden for centuries. Clara looked toward them, though she had never seen those doors before. Somehow, she knew what waited beyond them remembered her. Inside her mind, the hidden voice spoke again. Do not be afraid. Clara swallowed. Who are you? For several seconds, There was only warmth. Then came an answer that changed the silence around her forever. I am the part of you they taught the world to forget. For one suspended moment, Clara forgot the hundreds of people surrounding her. The voice inside her felt closer than breath, yet impossibly old, carrying a calm that seemed untouched by fear, rank, or judgment. Then the moonlight changed. A silver beam poured through the high windows despite the clouds covering the night sky, settling around Clara in a pale circle. The markings beneath her feet brightened. She did not move. She did not need to. Something within her was finally rising after 23 years of silence. Clara, Evelyn whispered. Clara turned toward her grandmother, but a sudden warmth moved through her vision. The hall blurred, then sharpened. Colors became brighter. She could hear every breath nearby, the soft rustle of ceremonial fabric, even rain beginning against windows nearly 80 feet away. Yet there was no pain, only awareness. Her gray eyes slowly became silver touched with gold. A collective gasp filled the hall. Behind Clara, moonlight gathered into the outline of a wolf. At first it was only mist, then shoulders, ears, and luminous eyes emerged within the silver glow. The spirit-like wolf stood taller than any ordinary wolf Clara had ever seen, its white and silver form carrying faint golden markings along its chest. Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. Several older wolves lowered their heads without understanding why. Others followed, moved by an instinct older than etiquette. Vanessa stepped backward, her confidence replaced by astonishment. Rowan remained motionless beside the throne. Then, after 2 days of silence, his wolf suddenly returned. Not with anger, not with triumph, with one unmistakable command. Bow. Rowan's fingers tightened around the ancient crown. He had never felt his wolf submit to another presence. Yet what stood behind Clara did not feel dominant in the way an alpha did. It demanded nothing. That somehow made its authority more profound. Rowan slowly lowered the crown to the cushion. Silas moved toward Clara, his face drained of color. Those markings, he whispered. Evelyn turned sharply toward him. You recognize them? Silas stared at the golden symbols appearing across the spectral wolf. I have seen them once. In a manuscript the crown classified as legend. What legend? Rowan asked. Silas seemed reluctant to answer. The sacred memory wolves. The name traveled through the hall in uncertain whispers. Clara heard the hidden wolf inside her breathe, almost as if remembering a forgotten language. Silas continued carefully. They were said to carry more than instinct. They carried memory, knowledge passed through generations without books, archives, or kings deciding what history should survive. Rowan looked toward the ancient doors. Their silver markings now matched those glowing around Clara. Why have I never heard of them? Silas gave him a troubled look. That is the question we should be asking. Clara closed her eyes. Images flashed through her mind too quickly to understand. A moonlit temple, women wearing silver cloaks, a king placing his crown beside a Luna rather than upon her, and a sealed door disappearing into darkness. Clara opened her eyes with a startled breath. I saw something. Silas stepped closer. What? Before Clara could answer, the great white wolf behind her lifted its head. No sound came from its mouth, yet every wolf in the hall suddenly became still. Then the ancient voice inside Clara spoke with quiet certainty. They believe we disappeared. Clara felt the words rather than heard them. Her heartbeat matched the deeper rhythm within her. Why did you? She asked silently. The wolf's silver-gold eyes seemed to look through 8 centuries of forgotten history. We did not disappear. A pause followed. We hid. Rowan felt the room grow colder. Clara stared toward the sealed doors beneath the balcony as their ancient locks began opening one by one. Whatever waited beyond them was not merely Clara's secret. It was the kingdom's. The ancient doors opened without a sound, revealing a narrow staircase descending beneath the royal moon hall. Cool silver light glowed along the stone walls, illuminating symbols that matched the markings around Clara's awakened wolf. No one rushed forward. Even the council members who had spent their lives speaking with certainty seemed unwilling to cross that threshold. Clara felt the presence inside her settle into patient silence. I think it wants me to go down, she said. Rowan stepped forward instinctively. You are not going alone. Clara looked at him. 2 days earlier, those words might have comforted her. Now they carried a different weight. Then walk beside me, she said quietly. Not in front of me. Rowan understood. He nodded. Silas joined them, carrying the old ledger, while Evelyn followed. Clara. They descended nearly 60 feet beneath the palace before the staircase opened into a circular chamber untouched by time. Shelves carved directly into the walls held sealed manuscripts, stone tablets, and silver cylinders covered in unfamiliar writing. At the center stood 2 empty pedestals. One bore the symbol of a crown. The other bore the crescent eye Clara had seen upstairs. Silas approached slowly. "The royal archive begins 3 floors above us," he murmured. "This chamber is not recorded on any palace map." Clara moved toward the second pedestal. The instant her fingertips touched its surface, silver light traveled across the room. Images appeared along the walls like memories projected through moonlight. A king stood before a gathering of ancient packs. Beside him stood a woman in a silver cloak, a luminous white wolf behind her. Neither stood above the other. They stood side by side. Words formed beneath them. Silas translated aloud. "The crown shall protect what lives. The memory shall preserve what is true." Rowan stared at the inscription. Memory. Clara felt her hidden wolf stir. Images rushed through her mind again, clearer this time. Generations of women listening to elders, witnessing treaties, remembering promises, carrying truths no ruler could rewrite. She suddenly understood. They were living archives. Silas looked at her in astonishment. Clara continued, guided by knowledge that felt both unfamiliar and deeply her own. Sacred memory wolves carried ancestral memories from one generation to the next. Not every detail. The things their line believed the future could not afford to forget. Rowan's gaze moved across the chamber. Then why remove them from history? Silence answered until Evelyn noticed something behind the first pedestal. Because someone wanted history to belong to the crown alone. A section of inscription had been deliberately erased. Nearby, several stone tablets were missing, leaving clean rectangular spaces beneath centuries of dust. Silas opened his ledger and compared the surviving symbols. His expression changed. The official histories say the first Alpha Kings ruled through strength and divine authority. But this says royal authority was divided. Rowan looked at the 2 pedestals. Power and memory. Clara nodded. One could act. The other could remember why. The simplicity of it unsettled him more than any accusation. A kingdom without memory could repeat its mistakes while calling them tradition. Clara moved toward the far wall, where one final inscription glowed beneath the image of several sacred wolves disappearing into a forest. She touched it. A memory entered her mind. Women removing silver cloaks. Families changing their names. Children being taught never to reveal the voices sleeping inside them. Then darkness. Clara pulled her hand away. They chose to hide. From whom? Rowan asked. Before Clara could answer, her wolf spoke inside her. From a king who feared truths he could not command. Clara slowly turned toward Rowan. He saw no accusation in her eyes, only a question far more difficult to face. What kind of king would he choose to become? Then another symbol appeared beneath Clara's hand, one Silas had never seen. It showed not one sacred wolf, but many, scattered across the kingdom like stars. Clara's breath caught. The line had survived beneath the dust for 8 centuries. Silas read it softly. When memory wakes again, the hidden will hear her. Far above them, beyond the palace walls, somewhere deep in the northern mountains, another sleeping wolf opened its eyes. Clara remained beside the glowing inscription long after the final words faded from the stone. Somewhere beyond the chamber, another sacred memory wolf had awakened, and the knowledge should have filled her with wonder. Instead, she found herself thinking about choice. 8 centuries ago, people like her had chosen disappearance rather than allow their memories to become tools of power. 2 days ago, Rowan had chosen approval over the bond between them. Different choices, different consequences, yet both had shaped lives far beyond the moment they were made. When they returned to the Royal Moon Hall, the gathering had not dispersed. Hundreds of wolves waited beneath the silver banners, their questions hanging in the air. Clara entered first. Rowan followed several steps. Behind. That detail did not escape the council. Elder Marcus approached immediately. Your Majesty, whatever happened below can be discussed privately. The kingdom needs stability tonight. Rowan looked at him. For most of his life, stability had meant controlling uncertainty before anyone could see it. Now he understood how easily control could disguise fear. No, Rowan said. The kingdom needs truth. He walked toward the center of the hall, then stopped before Clara. Every conversation ended. Clara felt her hidden wolf watching quietly within her. Rowan removed the royal signet from his hand and placed it beside the rejected Luna bracelet still resting near the throne. Then he did something no one expected. He lowered himself to one knee. Shock moved through the hall like wind through leaves. Rowan, Clara whispered. He looked up at her, not as a king addressing an Omega, but as a man facing the consequence of his own decision. I knew the bond was real, he said. I rejected you because I was afraid the kingdom would see your difference as my weakness. I called that duty. It was fear. Clara's throat tightened. This was the apology she had deserved, but hearing it did not erase what had happened. Rowan continued. I cannot ask destiny to undo my choice simply because I regret it, and I will not claim you as though your forgiveness belongs to me. The hall remained utterly still. I am sorry, Clara. She studied his face. No command. No royal certainty. Only accountability. Clara stepped closer. I forgive you. Relief flickered across Rowan's expression, but Clara was not finished. Forgiveness is not the same as trust. His relief softened into understanding. I know. Do you? Clara asked. Her voice remained gentle. You changed your mind after discovering that I carried something powerful. How am I supposed to know you would have changed if my wolf had remained silent? The question landed across the hall with greater force than any accusation. Rowan slowly rose. You cannot know. Clara nodded. Neither can I. She glanced toward the council, then toward the people who had once whispered that a wolfless Omega could never stand beside a king. If you want my trust, do not prove that you can love a powerful Luna. Prove that you can respect someone when the world gives you no reason to be impressed by them. Rowan absorbed every word. Then he turned toward Elder Marcus. Beginning tonight, no wolf in this kingdom will lose rank, opportunity, or legal protection because they cannot shift. Marcus stiffened. Your Majesty, that law is centuries old. Rowan looked toward the ancient doors beneath the balcony. So was the lie beneath our palace. Clara felt warmth bloom inside her. Her hidden wolf spoke only once. He is learning. Clara almost smiled. Rowan looked back at her. I will not ask you to return to me tonight. Good, Clara said softly. Because I would say no. A few startled breaths rose from the crowd. Rowan smiled for the first time. Then I will become someone worth asking again. Before Clara could answer, the silver markings beneath the ancient doors suddenly brightened. Her hidden wolf lifted its head inside her mind. A memory was coming. Not Clara's. Not Evelyn's. Something older. Clara reached for the nearest stone pillar, and the hall vanished from her sight. She saw an ancient throne, a sacred Luna beside it, and a crown being divided into two symbols. Then a voice from 8 centuries ago whispered through her memory. If the crown forgets why it serves, memory must remind it. The royal moon hall disappeared, and Clara found herself standing inside a memory 8 centuries old. She knew her body had not moved, yet every detail around her felt real. Moonlight poured through windows that no longer existed. The palace walls were younger, their stone pale and untouched by time. At the center of the hall stood an alpha king, wearing the same silver crown Rowan had lifted only minutes earlier. Beside him stood a woman in a white cloak, her sacred memory wolf glowing behind her like moonlight given form. Neither bowed to the other. Before them, representatives from dozens of packs waited in respectful silence. The ancient king raised his hand. Strength protects the kingdom, he said. The sacred Luna placed her palm over the crescent symbol carved into the floor. Memory protects its purpose. Clara felt the meaning before she fully understood it. The first kingdom had never been designed for one ruler to hold unquestioned authority. The Alpha King commanded armies, enforced laws, and protected the borders. The sacred Luna preserved treaties, promises, failures, and lessons across generations. One guarded the kingdom from dangers outside. The other guarded it from forgetting itself. The memory shifted. Years passed in seconds. New kings appeared. New Lunas stood beside them. Then something changed. The crown grew more powerful, while the crescent symbols slowly vanished from ceremonies, documents, and walls. Sacred Lunas became advisors. Advisors became legends. Legends became myths. Clara saw scribes rewriting histories, not with dramatic cruelty, but with something quieter and perhaps more dangerous, convenience. Each generation removed a little more truth until no one remembered there had ever been another way. Then Clara understood the warning. A lie did not always begin as a lie. Sometimes it began as a truth people found inconvenient to preserve. The vision changed again. The last sacred Luna stood before several families beneath a moonless sky. "Do not fight to be remembered," she told them. "Survive long enough for truth to need you again." Families scattered across the kingdom. Names changed. Records disappeared. The sacred wolves became silent within their descendants, waiting. Clara suddenly recognized one family's symbol carved into a traveling chest. A small white flower beneath a crescent moon. Whitmore. The memory released her. Clara opened her eyes and found Rowan holding out his hand without touching her, waiting for permission. She nodded, and he gently steadied her. "What did you see?" Silas asked. Clara looked around the hall. Hundreds were still watching. This time, she did not fear their judgment. The crown was never meant to rule alone. A murmur rose, but Rowan lifted one hand, and the hall quieted. Clara explained what she had seen. She spoke of strength and memory, protection and wisdom, and how generations had slowly mistaken centralized power for tradition. When she finished, Elder Marcus looked troubled. "A memory is not law." "No," Clara replied. "But neither is tradition automatically wisdom." Rowan's gaze moved to the crown. For most of his life, it had represented duty. Now it represented an unfinished story. "Then we restore the records," he said. Silas stared at him. "All of them, especially the ones that make the crown uncomfortable." Clara looked at Rowan, surprised by the simplicity of his answer. He met her eyes. "If truth weakens my authority, then my authority was built on something too fragile." The hidden wolf inside Clara stirred with quiet approval. Then a new sensation traveled through her, distant but unmistakable. One heartbeat, then another, then dozens, scattered far beyond Blackthorn Valley. Clara turned toward the northern windows. Silver points appeared briefly across her vision like stars on an invisible map. Evelyn stepped closer. "What is it?" Clara listened. The voices were faint, sleeping minds beginning to remember themselves. Her breath caught. "The sacred wolves." Silas went still. "How many?" Clara could not answer. The silver lights continued appearing, some hundreds of miles apart. Her hidden wolf finally spoke. "Memory has called." Clara looked toward Rowan as an ancient truth settled over them both. Her awakening had never been about making one rejected Omega powerful enough to deserve a king. It was about awakening a kingdom wise enough to understand why she had always deserved respect. Then, far beyond the palace, another sacred wolf answered the call. By sunrise, the kingdom had begun to change, though not in the way Clara once imagined change would look. There were no grand celebrations waiting outside the palace, only messengers carrying new orders, archivists opening sealed records, and leaders facing questions their ancestors had avoided for centuries. Rowan stood before the gathered representatives in the Royal Moon Hall without wearing his crown. It rested on the table beside him. "For generations, we confused tradition with truth," he said. "Beginning today, every hidden royal record will be opened for review. No wolf will be considered lesser because they cannot shift, and no rank will determine whether a voice deserves to be heard." Clara watched from beside Evelyn. She noticed what Rowan did not say. He did not announce her as his Luna. He did not invoke destiny. He did not turn his apology into a demand for forgiveness. For the first time, he was allowing his actions to speak before asking his heart to be believed. Days passed. Rowan met with Omegas who had never been invited into royal councils. He asked healers, farmers, teachers, and pack elders what laws looked like from outside a throne room. Sometimes Clara attended. Sometimes she deliberately did not. Trust, she discovered, grew best when it was not forced. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her awakening, Clara found Rowan in the palace garden beneath an old white oak. He held no documents and wore no royal insignia. "You changed the law," she said. Rowan looked toward her. "The law needed changing, even if my wolf had never awakened." He was silent for a moment. Then he answered carefully, "I wish I could tell you I would have understood without losing you first. I cannot." Clara appreciated the truth more than an easy promise. Rowan continued, "But I understand now. Your power did not make you worthy. It exposed how wrong I was when I thought you needed power to be worthy." Inside Clara, The sacred wolf stirred gently. She walked closer. That is the first answer you have given me that sounds like wisdom. Rowan smiled. I have had a demanding teacher. Clara almost laughed. The mate bond between them remained faint but present, no longer a chain pulling them together, but an unanswered invitation. Clara finally held out her hand. Rowan looked at it before taking it, giving her every chance to change her mind. When their fingers met, warmth moved through Clara, quiet and familiar. Destiny chose us once, she said. This time, I choose for myself. Rowan's eyes softened. And what do you choose? A beginning. Nothing more than that. Then a beginning is enough. Moonlight filtered through the oak branches. Clara's white and silver wolf appeared beside her, no longer hidden, its golden markings glowing softly. Rowan's wolf answered within him, not bowing from submission this time, but recognizing an equal presence. Then Clara felt it again. Far away. One heartbeat. Another. Then many. She turned north. Across the kingdom, descendants of forgotten sacred wolves were beginning to hear voices that had slept for generations. One presence felt especially strong, somewhere beyond the mountains more than 300 miles away. Clara closed her eyes. A voice she did not recognize whispered through the ancient connection. Memory has returned. Clara opened her eyes and looked toward the horizon. Rowan followed her gaze. What did you hear? Clara smiled, but wonder had replaced certainty in her expression. I thought my wolf was the secret. The distant presence answered again, and Clara finally understood. Her awakening had not ended an ancient story. It had reopened one. I am not the last.